Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
What's up? What is up? It's your host, Elia Einhorn. Welcome back to the Talkhouse Podcast. We have an incredible show for you today. The National's Matt Berninger in conversation with singer-songwriter extraordinaire Aimee Mann. Now, before we jump in, regular listeners to our show have heard us waxing rhapsodic about the live streams that have helped us forget that we are in quarantine these last weeks. Well, Talkhouse is going to be sharing a couple of live Talkhouse Podcast conversations over the next week and a half or so. These will feature Helado Negro with Buscabulla, and also Julian Baker with Katie Harkin of Slater Kinney, Courtney Barnett's band, and so many more. You can check out our events tab at talkhouse.com for all the details there. Now, to intro today's episode, I am very pleased to welcome back
Nick Dawson, editor-in-chief of Talkhouse Film. It is very good to be back, and I am a big fan of Matt Berninger, as I'm finally now saying his name correctly after listening to this.
I've been saying it wrong for years,
Yeah.
Nick. I thought it was Berninger, as every other
Human.
music industry and fan did.
Yeah, and Aimee Mann, two people whose music I really love, and also who both have really cool connections to film as well as music. So very excited that we're doing this.
Yeah, and today's episode is really neat in that it's co-curated with the team behind the Other Music documentary. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Other Music, for 20 years, it was an iconic record store in the Village in New York City. It helped spawn the careers of some incredible bands, including Matt Berninger and The National.
Yeah, it was like, one of my favorite record stores to go to always. And, it was very, very sad when it closed in 2016. And this documentary is a really fitting sort of tribute to the store and the community that was built around it and the legacy that it has in many ways as well.
With theaters closing due to COVID-19, the film has been released via a virtual theatrical plan. Here's what was really cool about it. The filmmakers partnered with over 200 independent movie theaters and record stores across America and around the world to sell streaming rentals, with 50% of the net profit going to that store or theater. So such a cool way for a film that's a love letter to a record store and the community that can be around that to give back to other ones that are suffering during this time. Our producer, Mark Yoshizumi, rented the film from Reckless Records in Chicago, where he used to work. I rented it from Record Grouch in Brooklyn, that's in Greenpoint, and I've bought some amazing records from them over the years. And Nick, you went out to LA for your choice.
I virtually visited Permanent Records in LA. It was really nice to go back to that place.
Yeah. Now, this very limited release only runs for another week or 10 days, so make sure to head over to www.factory25.com/othermusic. That'll give you the full list of stores you can rent it from, and any music lover will thoroughly relate to and enjoy the film, and you will also be supporting a community that's having a very difficult time right now.
Go get it.
The Other Music documentary features tons of artists that have appeared on the Talkhouse Podcast over the years. Ready? Big breath. TV on the radio, The Magnetic Fields, The National, Superchunk, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Jason Schwartzman, Animal Collective, William Basinski, Frankie Cosmos, and more. This is a #TalkhouseCore film, Nick.
Yeah, and just to clear up any potential confusion, one of the co-founders of Other Music is Josh Madell, not to be confused with our very own Josh Modell.
No. And Josh Modell also is not associated with the athletic wear and shoe store Modell's,
that we
which
know
one
of.
sees all around
that
New York.
That we know of.
Now, our guests on this week's show do not need much introduction, right? Aimee Mann is an acclaimed, multiple Grammy award-winning singer and songwriter. She kicked off her career in the band Till Tuesday. That was alongside John Bryan. And she found massive success in the late 90s through her collaboration with Paul Thomas Anderson. She wrote songs for his film Magnolia. She's had an incredible career since, releasing solo records and also collaborative records with Ted Leo. They put out joints under the name The Both, and the two of them have recently started their own podcast, The Art of Process.
Yeah, I'm such a big Aimee Mann fan, and I have very happy memories of the start of my so-called journalistic career, listening to the Magnolia soundtrack when I was like going down to London, watching a bunch of movies, and sort of like immersing myself in the world of film. And that soundtrack, which came out in 2000, was just, I don't know, it's an incredible record, and the film remains one of my favorite movies of that period. It's fantastic.
Yeah, an absolute classic. Now, in 2017, Aimee released her most recent record. That was her 9th studio LP. It's called Mental Illness. From that record, let's take a listen to Goose Snow Cone.
Always checking the weather, but they want to know why. Even birds of a feather find it hard to fly.
A great song, and very rightly, that record won the Grammy for Best Folk Album in 2018.
The Grammy voters were big fans of her. Another big fan, Matt Berninger.
Damn straight. Yeah, and Matt's been on the podcast before with Conor Oberst, and he's half of the band Elvi, and more famously, of course, the frontman of The National. And of course, he has provided music to some of the documentaries of Talkhouse contributor Marshall Curry, who won an Oscar this year for his short film, The Neighbor's Window. And, it's very cool to have him on the podcast once again.
Matt was part of a really cool project called 7 Inches for Planned Parenthood. That was a series of literal 7-inch records that came as a box set that featured some incredible artists. But just recently, Nick, Matt went on Colbert to perform a cover of Holes by Mercury Rev, the same cover that appears in that box set. Let's take a listen to that now.
With all the stones I throw, how does that old song go?
Great track, great cover, great cause. In this conversation, Matt and Aimee get into a lot. Of course, this coming around the release of the Other Music documentary, they talk a lot about the incomparable community that builds around spaces that are dedicated to music. Record stores, music venues. They talk a lot about the famous LA venue, Largo.
Yeah, and Aimee talks about her old job working at a record store at Newbury Comics in Boston.
Legendary place. Like Other Music, whenever I was in town with my old band Scotland Yard Gospel Choir, I would spend quite a bit of money there. They talk about how they're handling work and planning for future work as artists who can't tour during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, The National are particularly, like a really busy touring band. And
road dogs.
Yeah, so this is a tough time for them, for sure.
There's also some really cool conversation about some new projects coming up. Matt Berninger is planning to start his own label imprint. How cool is this going to be?
Yeah, and he's also working on a musical, which it seems like he might have roped in Aimee to join him on, which is very exciting.
We also get to hear about the musical theater projects that Aimee's been working on.
And the pretty harsh, cruel rejection letter that Matador Records sent to the National some years back. I think they may be regretting that now.
Should we run the tape?
Let's run the tape.
I use GarageBand for everything I do, and I don't even plug a microphone in because I just use it as the writing tool, and I just mumble into it. And for me, just so I can open up my laptop, open up a GarageBand file and just start singing. It's better for me than to have to plug something in. And even one little extra step, is just such a nuisance. So I always the writing process is different than the recording process, for me. Like once a song is done, then I'll worry about the microphones. And actually then I won't even worry. Someone else will worry about the microphones, but...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, those are two different jobs. And I long ago realized the learning curve for me to figure out how to have a home studio was just too steep and it would take too much time and effort. So I don't even bother with, I do GarageBand because I have a podcast with my friend Ted Leo.
Yeah.
But for writing, I just do voice memos on the iPhone.
Yeah. No, I know. I don't play instruments and stuff, so I don't really need to have a soundproof place for any of that kind of thing. But I also don't want to necessarily have a studio at home because you feel like you're never at home then. You feel like you're always at a job or sort of. And so that being said, Aaron has this barn studio upstate New York, which is just so nice to be able to just camp out there for a while. So I love being in studios when it's record time, but not really before.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's like you have to concentrate on the job at hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can't mix the two.
Yeah. Are you in LA?
I am. And
I'm
I
in
assume you
Venice.
were in New York. You're in Venice?
Yeah, I moved to Venice, California about
Oh.
7 years ago, actually. Yeah. I moved to New York right out of college and was there for 18 years. And then my wife and daughter and I have an 11-year-old. But we moved out here about 7 years ago and just fell in love. And yeah, I don't have any plans to leave for a while. But did you go to other music in New York or a lot?
No, I never did. Like it's clearly like a very New York institution. And like, I mean, I'd sort of heard about it here and there, but the documentary was like really the first deep dive. Did you go to other music? Were you familiar with it?
Yeah, I worked at the Puck building, which is at the corner of like Lafayette and Houston, and about 4 blocks just right down the street from it. And I worked there for about 10 years. And I went there. This is in the like late. It opened in I think 99 or I can't remember, but right around there. Yeah. So for about 8 or 10 years, I would go there, and I was working at a design job, and I was designing websites, and I would go there a couple times a week and buy 2 or 3 records. And I was spending most of my money on records or going to Mercury Lounge, which is just a few blocks from there. So it was a really special store. But the truth is, I mean, there is like almost every independent record store has that same vibe of, I mean, unless it's a big Tower Records or a big, Best Buy or something like that. If it's an independently owned record store, it's usually pretty curated, and the people usually have passionate feelings about music and kind of are always intimidating. But I mean, so Other Music was a really, really, really well curated shop and with really kind of intense music lovers who worked there, and it was intimidating. But I mean, every little, like, I remember there was a record store in Cincinnati called Wizards that I would go to, and I remember just being so intimidated going into those places. But they're all of that is like you're going into a place where there's something you want to know about because you love it, but these people know more about it, and you feel like a fool, and you always feel stupid. But that's
really funny. Yeah, the aspect that I got, it was kind of unexpected that people going into the record store would find the clerks to be like overbearing or intimidating or supercilious. And like, to me, it's like, it's very, I don't know, there's something really funny about that.
Yeah.
I used to work at back in, starting in like 1980, I think, I worked at Newbury Comics in Boston, which started out as, a comic book store with some records and then became a record store. And, we were the super indie record store in town. And of course, I can't imagine that we came across like that, but I don't know. Like, it's hard to say just because when you work at a store and you listen to everything that comes in, you're inevitably going to have you're going to be soaking in a different kind of musical thing than most people.
Yeah. The other thing also is like most record shops, I mean, any small independent shop, whether you're selling, coffee or a flower shop. Flower shops are usually pretty sweet, but you're going to have people that are actually just working a job all day long. But at a coffee shop, they don't have everybody asking like millions of questions about like what coffee is and like, what all the different people kind of know what they want. But I never minded people with those attitudes. I kind of wanted, I don't like when people treat you like you're dumb, but I like people who knew more than I did, and who knew what the cool stuff was, and I wanted them to tell me what was better than the average crap that was on the radio. I was searching for someone who could help me find better stuff, so I kind of respected them. I didn't always feel comfortable, but it was all right, I didn't mind it.
It's nice when people are really enthusiastic about something and really care about something. I think that when that goes over to they're identifying with it a little too closely, because you're right, like nobody at Starbucks has a personal identification with a certain kind of coffee.
Yeah.
I stand by the flat white.
Right.
Yeah, nobody has that.
And people working at record shops, they're in there because music is really important. It's a big deal to them. It's like nobody goes into selling records to be upwardly mobile, unless you're trying to start a giant chain and all this, but most of them are just trying to go to work at a place surrounded with things they like and promote the things they like. But it's still a job, and I never minded the people at other music. I mean, there was attitude there, but I was so happy because they were directing me towards so much better stuff than I would have just like grabbed off of but by listening to radio. All the stuff that they were selling you wouldn't hear it anywhere else. And I discovered, so many artists that led me to so many other artists just from that one shop. So yeah, it definitely defined a lot of my musical sort of fabric, that shop. And every other shop before that, in Cincinnati and all the little ones I would go to. But so Newbury Comics was your shop.
Yeah. And, I worked there, and there was nothing better than, getting a shipment of records in from England. And, it was all stuff like if you read the music papers from England, which we all did, like we were all obsessed with the NME.
Yeah.
And, you'd see these records, like A Certain Ratio or like The Birthday Party or, just weird stuff that you had read about. And then we could play records in the store and listen to them right there. And that was just like very exciting. There's something exciting about just allowing yourself to be exposed to different music and see what's out there, even if it's kind of weird and even if you don't necessarily like it, it's good to know about it and spend time with it.
Yeah. And there's also a thing, I remember like going to other music and often seeing a lot of the same people there, people that work there. And then I would go to see, shows at Brownies or Luna Lounge or Mercury Lounge, and I'd see the same people, right? And that was a thing. And I remember, the Strokes were like a touch point in New York, and a bunch of those bands, but other music put the Strokes, Modern Age EP on this little front shelf, and it wasn't available anywhere here yet. It was from the UK, and it was an import, and it just sold out immediately. And then they did these shows, and it was like, you kind of knew who went and got that EP because you were talking to people like, hey, did you get the EP? They only had like 5. And then you would go to the show, and like everyone who bought that EP is at that show. So it was a community between the clubs, between the record stores. There's a whole ecosystem in the bars, all the little bars around there, and it was a crucible of experimentation and people sharing influences and favorite stuff. But that happens in every town. And I mean, LA has places like, has the record stores. I shop at a vinyl place called Atomic Records on Venice, but places like Largo, and there's these communities. And I think at LA, there's a really, really, really rich community of venues and musicians and bands, and Silver Lake and that whole neighborhood and everything. It feels like every city has. Ohio and Dayton, where I came from, had that. There was this little scene of bands like Afghan Wigs and Breeders and Tiger Lilies and Lizard 99 that were, you'd see them at the record stores, you'd see them at the bars, and then you'd go see their gig, and that's happening here, I think, in LA too. Do you think so?
Well, there's something, I am sort of part of the Largo scene, and I do find that to have a place to go, to have, different musicians that you can interact with, also comedians, Largo was the place I met all my comedian friends, and to have that kind of cross-pollination, it does create a sense of community, and music is so much an essential part of that community. It's really the glue for that kind of scene. That's really an important part of my life. I think that's was a sad thing about other music is you really saw how that created a community, and the idea that that record store would go out of business was just really, by the end of it, even though I had never been there and didn't really, it wasn't really part of my scene, it was really so heartbreaking to see it fall apart because it's, a whole family that got splintered and shattered and, with nothing else to bind them together.
Well, Josh, who's one of the co-founders in that, Josh Maydell, he went on and he works for Secretly Canadian, the Secretly distribution stuff. So what's really interesting about the community of all the people he would buy records from, he's very much still involved in figuring out how to spread good music around. And I have a question for you. It's kind of about, Largo and people like Mark Flanagan who, curates all that stuff, and he brings in the comedians. And I've done some things at Largo with Pete Holmes, and one of my favorite moments was Pete Holmes, the comedian, asked me to be on his special at Largo, and I was going to do a cover of a Perfume Genius song, but I can't play the piano. And so Flanny said, well, let me just see if I can find somebody. And I get there, and he's like, oh, John's going to do it, and it's John Bryan. And so I John Bryan, like Flanny can just bring John Bryan to play piano with me at Largo, and John will just, sure, and pop in. And that kind of thing is there's all these different ways of having these communities, and Largo became kind of like a church for comedy and for music and Flanny, Mark Flanagan specifically, he brought all these people together, like Elliott Smith, and
yeah, I talked to him yesterday. Like he is that guy who is like the hub of a certain, because all these musicians and comedians kind of come through, and he has a certain kind of relationship with them. But I often go to him for ideas about, I don't know if I'm playing a show and it's the same thing. Like if, you need musicians or you need a comedian for a thing, or if I'm putting my Christmas show together, what guest would be good? Like he's really great at chiming in with that, kind of musical problem solving.
Yeah, he, after Trump won, the Nationals manager, Brandon Reed, and I started this thing, 7 Inches for Planned Parenthood, which was, I wanted to just put out a bunch of series of 7 inches, and I wanted, comedians and poets and doctors and musicians and bands all to do like split singles together, because I thought the idea of a good argument from a lawyer or a doctor about the right to choose, and I thought that was, something you should listen to over and over again, just like a good song. And so Flanny reached out on my behalf to Sarah Silverman and Zach Alvex. I knew a little bit, but just all these incredible, Jenny Slate and all these wonderful people that he brought into it, musicians too, and just on his word, because people trust his sense of communities, trust that he wants to do good things for good artists who are sending out the right kind of messages. And just because he endorsed me, I got people I'd never met to just without question send me jokes and send me stuff for this series. And yeah, it's just an example of how one person and one idea and one venue and one creative ambition can create a really powerful network and a really inspiring network.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And it's funny because I've known Flanny for years and years, but your description of him, it makes me realize, like, yeah, that is a magical resource. Like, that's a magical thing to have in your life, to have somebody like that.
Yeah, and like record stores, like a small business that's devoted to just the things you love. And Flanny managed to bring everything he loves into the same one small business,
Yeah.
A little theater. And he's doing, I think, a TV show now and stuff about it. And it's just, he's so inspiring and kind of just like break the mold, which is right now, the mold of how musicians and artists keep the lights on is broken, right? So with COVID and who knows, we might not be able to tour for a year, right? Do you tour a lot still?
I don't tour a ton, and I didn't have anything scheduled till September, but I kind of feel like it's still, I don't think things are going to be back to normal by September. Did you have tours scheduled? Did you have shows that you had to cancel?
I think I'm supposed to be in Australia now.
Oh, man.
Or no, maybe I would have been back from Australia, but I think that, so we had, all kinds of stuff. So,
wow.
But it's interesting because all of us are evolving and inventing new ways to do what we're doing. And I miss, and it'll come back. And like the idea of not being in front of fans is heartbreaking. But I know that'll come back eventually. But the thing that I've been really inspired by is how many new ideas people have been having. Even with this other music doc, they figured out they were going to have like a theatrical release for it, but they couldn't. So they decided to sell the doc through independent record stores around the country that are shuttered right now. I bought the doc from a place called Skeleton Dust Records in Dayton, Ohio, through their website. I've never even been to that record store.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah, and so there's these new models that we're inventing. Like when one model falls apart, creative people just create new models. And
have you been doing, sort of the home streaming performance thing?
I did a Colbert thing, and it was really fast. Even watching how Colbert and all live television has reinvented itself. So much of the artifice is gone, and you're seeing these really, really raw really, really, and it's nice to just like, oh, that's Colbert's, cluttered living room.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the SNL where everybody was like, I kind of really enjoyed that. I just did, there's a thing called the 24-hour musicals or 24-hour plays. Some of them are plays, but they do musicals too. And usually it's like, already a short musical, like 15 minutes with 3 songs. But because it's little online chunks, it was just, one scene and one song. And I just have to say, like, it's really fun. And it's really fun to see actors just make do with whatever props they have in their house and to set up their phone and film a thing. And, you realize, like, how much just comes down to great acting and, funny writing or personalities or, good songs or whatever.
Yeah.
It's nice to kind of strip things down to basics. But I haven't done any streaming, just like solo performance stuff, because I really like playing with people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I'll do something, but I like having a band. I like having other people to interact with.
Yeah. That's the other part of it. That's I'm writing a lot and, just sending files back and forth, which is a way I've done it in a long time. But you still get together in a room and bang it out and have in band practice where it's and like a song gets gnarly and evolves and it's almost, sometimes it feels a little bit like everyone's cooking the same meal in different kitchens where, all the ingredients are just perfect, but you just can't get them in the pot together to make it all, the ratatouille. It tastes like a salad, not ratatouille.
Well, you miss that magical thing that happens when people are just in the same room together and everybody's listening to each other. And that's like really what makes the magic of a band or a magic of a live performance. When people listen to each other and it's like a flock of starlings where they suddenly change direction because, they're all on the same wavelength. And boy, that's nice. I really miss that.
Did you read Karen Russell's piece in the New Yorker about the flock of starlings? You just mentioned flock of starlings.
No.
There's a writer that I really like named Karen Russell, and my wife Corinne used to edit her when she was the New Yorker, but she just wrote a piece in the New Yorker, and she described she lives in Austin, and she describes how watching the starlings and how they move so quickly, and they have this sense, and they all razor turns in the air, and they bunch up, and then they blade out behind the buildings, and she just describes it so beautifully, and then she uses that metaphor to describe how the beginning of the COVID, everyone was off in this chaos, but then when everyone started to understand and how we're not all together, but we all sort of flocked to this group think of everyone staying at home and how quickly we're all moving and adjusting to the environment and what's happening. The way starlings will just quickly, a danger this way, the whole group will suddenly swish and they instantly are like paying attention to each other. And a band is like that, but that kind of feels like everyone on the planet is a little bit. And that's what she's making this reference to. We're all this like kind of quiet flock of starlings who we all grouped at home just because of everything's changing so quickly. And anyway, I just, we're in such a strange time.
Well, we are herd animals, I think like when the herd finally does get a whiff of danger in the air, the herd will act swiftly. But sometimes it takes a lot of danger in the air for people to move. Like when I kind of look back on it, it took me a little while. I was actually on a cruise that left March 7th. And, March 7th, there were like some cases in the U.S. and people were talking about it. And there was some conversation about like, is this safe or is it not safe? But, also the idea that there could be millions of people walking around asymptomatic wasn't really something that was talked about. And that's really a game changer too.
Yeah.
But halfway through the cruise, I would see things on Twitter about how fast it was happening. And by the time, everybody got off, it was like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Got to immediately go home and not leave.
Yeah. Yeah. When 9/11 happened, it was like this sense of, of everything sort of changed. But this feels just so more significant in a global sense. I know it's not the first time there's been a pandemic, but it's been the first time we've all been so connected and it moves so fast. The span, 18 whatever, the last
1918 flu,
1918, yeah. That was, you know, people weren't together so much and then apart. They were, but like I was thinking about, you know, a traveling band, not to, you know, is 10,000 people in one place, and then you get 30 people and your crew and everybody on 2 little buses, and then you go to another place for 10,000 people, and it's. I do feel like it might be a while before that kind of thing returns.
Well, you're just a germ target.
Right.
I know. Like now I'm thinking about in a totally different way that I was thinking about that today. You know, like all of the people you encounter, all of the flights, all of the airplane seat backs, all of
every day. You're either on a bus or in a venue or on a plane or an airport every day. It's, you know, a traveling band is a hard thing in a pandemic, right? And and then I've really started to process why people go to see live stuff. Like, you know, why do people go to want to see their favorite band in person and on stage and crowd and have to stand for 2 hours, you know, or in a sweaty, hot place, which, you know, and you'd spend a lot of money to do it. And it's because of this herding thing. People want to be together and to connect and see other people that just like a record store. You want to be around people that are not just like you, but that you feel that you can be your real self around. You can be the weird version of yourself around them. And they're all crying. You know, I'll go to like a show and I'll cry next to a total stranger for, you know, a song that's 20 years old. And that stranger, I just feel like that stranger would get me, you know? And so when you're in a room with 10,000 people, you're like, I think there's 10,000 people here that basically get me. If they like this band this much, the way I do, we must be more similar than sometimes we think, you know? And I'm really scared about losing that.
Yeah, there's a sense of connection and safety that comes from that sense of connection that that is like very hard to grapple with. And also for me, like I need to be around other people because I feel like I need other people's brains near me to regulate my own brains, you know, like my own thought processes. But I think that it can only happen when you're in a room with people. I think, you know, FaceTime helps, like looking at people helps, but I don't know, like I don't know if that's mirror neurons working or how it works, but I need to be around people to regulate my own thinking, you know, and my own mood extremes.
Yeah, people pull and push you in different directions. You know, I mean, if you talk about like a song, you know, a drummer can pull a song into an entirely different place by just speeding up a little bit, you know? Mm-hmm. And when the drummer's working on a drum track at home and sends you the drum track and then you add to that and then you build from home, you lose a lot of that dance.
Yeah, I know.
But on the other hand, things like, for example, watching, you know, Colbert, like you said, the writing is what matters. Like Colbert's monologues just from home in that living room without like an audience laughing are actually sometimes even more cutting and more hard-hitting. And I don't know if they're taking the gloves off more, you know? It just feels more potent. Somehow the points are being made even more of in a sort of a more dramatic or intense way without all the laugh track or the audience, without the artifice of the show.
Yeah, that's interesting because if you're not performing, I don't know, like the idea of performing you're in front of an audience, it gives you a certain leeway. It gives you cover because you can say, you know, implicitly to the audience, like, what I'm saying is more of a performance and less of a thing I really believe. But if it's one guy talking to you, it feels like that's a real thing that he's saying that he really believes.
Yeah.
And it's harder to shine it on as just like it's a joke or it's an exaggeration.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you also about, you have a label, right? You have your own label, Super Ego.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to kind of maybe do a label, Imprint too. And it's thinking of other music and how these networks and these communities like record shops and places like Largo Largo is doing great, but the record shops are going away. Labels can also be those communities. I mean, I used to buy, you know, like records from IRS, you know, and you know, Matador for me was like, I bought everything off of Matador. There was a period where literally I bought every Matador record. And because I just trusted the curatorial sort of. I tried the National tried to. We sent demos to Matador, and they sent us a letter that our band would never be a Matador band. It was like a brutal. It was like a brutal message. And
what is that? That's terrible.
I know.
You'll never be a Matador band.
It was in those days where Matador could write emails like that.
Man.
But it's the same sort of thing a little bit, like the attitude of people that like, no, we are. Our stable of artists are really, really important and precious, and we curate that. It's not just like throwing stuff at a wall to see if it sticks, and that's what the major labels do. And so I respect that kind of thing. You know, like the major labels are like Tower Records, but places like Matador or IRS or the indie labels, often they're like other music, and I want those labels and those radio stations and those late night shows to have attitude, you know, and
yeah, I agree. And I want there to be someone who cares about music, is in love with music, who's listening to a lot of stuff, and then at the end of the day comes to me and says, listen to these 5 bands. They're amazing. I know you'll like them. You know, because I feel like I don't listen to any modern music at all now because I'm lost in a sea of millions and millions of artists that I can't figure out where to start. I don't know where to go. I need that curation. I need that like old FM radio DJ or the record store or the, the band scene or the club or the one cool guy. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to be that cool guy. I think it's up to you, Matt.
Well, I do. I have a playlist that I started doing. I use Spotify a lot, but then I also have been going and buying a lot of vinyl. And I never actually owned any vinyl because when I started working, I worked at a golf course and then I delivered pizzas and stuff. And by the time I was buying records, like vinyl I was buying tapes, and And my sister, I had some vinyl, but like it quickly turned to cassettes. And then after that, it turned to CDs. And so I only started buying vinyl for the first time in my life about 5 years ago. So I'm doing the thing where I'm like slowly going back and collecting like a lot of older music, stuff that my parents used to have and just classics on vinyl. And then spending a lot of time on Spotify, doing deeper dives into all those artists, and then also just listening to other playlists. And I'm starting to discover a ton of new artists, even more now than I think I was while I was even in New York. I mean, New York, there's a scene and there's all the bands around there, but I was mostly just those bands, Interpol and LCD Sound System, and Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and TV on the radio and Walkman. Those were the peers, and those were everyone I was like listening to. But now I'm spending more time just like the algorithms work for me. Like when they suggest songs.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, when they suggest songs, about 1 out of 5 songs that is just randomly suggested to me that I've never heard of, an artist I've never heard of. 1 out of 5 of them I'll throw into a playlist. And you can just start to like organize new things and not knowing where they're from. There's a bunch of things I thought like, oh, that sounds brand new, and then I find out it's from. Oh, that's an Arthur Russell song from I'd never heard, and I thought it was some new artist, right? And so it goes both ways.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. A lot of the times I just use Spotify for, research on stuff. So I think its algorithm would be totally skewed, like, show tunes or Bangles songs. Like,
well, let me ask you then. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you real quickly about the musical stuff, because my wife and I, we worked on a musical. And,
oh, no kidding.
And neither of us are big musical fans. And it's sort of still in progress, the thing, but it's made us to start thinking of other musicals. It's just, the thing I liked the most about it was writing for a narrative and characters that weren't me. And
I love it.
Yeah, so
I love that.
Tell me about the one that you were doing, and did it change the way you write at all?
Well, it does, because musicals are so. What I'm learning is that there's a lot of factors. There's a musical that I'm working on with this playwright Jonathan Mark Sherman that's about a cult, and we're doing it with the public theater. But we need to find a director.
Yeah.
Until you have a director, you sort of at some point you have to start like having readings of it and making notes and refining it, and like that doesn't work and we should try this differently. So there's that one. And then I was asked to do music for like a potential musical of Girl Interrupted, but that's the music of which I'm probably going to put out on a record, but the musical, the book of it, like the writing of it is still up in the air, and that hasn't really happened. I sort of outpaced, I wrote too many songs. Like too many songs before there was really a story. So
I've been, my daughter has been reading me the Little House on the Prairie series, and I'm like, and I'm sure somebody's already doing it. Like that would be a great musical. It's like it'd be something like be Matilda, but it'd be set out in the Old West, and you'd have Native Americans, you'd have lots of kids, you'd have just and that book is so incredible. Like within the first 5 pages, like the Laura and her sister are kicking around a inflated pig's bladder. Right? Paul makes a soccer ball out of a pig's bladder. And it's so well written. And
you have to write the music for this musical. Okay, I'm going to look it up right now. I wonder if there have been a... I mean, it's the topics that there have been musicals about already is like, it's kind of amazing. Like somebody wrote a musical based on Die Hard.
Yeah.
Okay, Little House on the Prairie.
I'm sure there's it's in the works. Somebody owns the IP and it's being cooked, but...
Well, and you'd have to but you have to get the rights to it, but often the rights don't cost that much, and you pay a certain amount, and if you don't have a finished product by the end of a certain amount of time, or then the rights revert. Like it's sort of a step down.
What if
Little House on the Prairie is a book musical adapted from creative team. It's just,
But there's
2008. Yep, it was done. Sorry,
but that's the thing. There's there's a million versions. Like we just were working on Cyrano de Bergerac, and there are multiple versions of Cyrano de Bergerac musicals that have been made in dramas and dramatic versions. So I was thinking, if I just release a record of all these incredible songs that are about with Laura Ingalls, and I was even like, just release the record and just get out ahead of everybody, or just do it on your own and say, well, this is. If the songs are good enough, then the musical will come to you. That's kind of the...
Yeah, exactly.
Although I don't know if the songs are any, but I started writing a song that a bear sings this morning, and I was like, maybe I should back away.
Now that I've heard that there is a song a bear sings, I am afraid I must insist that this musical get made.
I agree.
Because to me, the bear alone is worth the price of admission.
Well, because a bunch of kids, and then there's a bear that starts singing. Are you not telling me kids aren't going to love that thing, and families? I think we should work on it.
Who doesn't want this? I know. Who doesn't want this musical?
That's right. I think this podcast is our pitch. So if you want to join me on this thing, we'll do this. As soon as you finish whatever one you're doing.
I'm totally down.
Yeah.
I'm totally down. Yeah, I'm your champion.
Okay, we'll make it. And if somebody already owns the IP for Little House on the Prairie, we'll just make it all about bears or something. Call it something else. Aimee, this has been such a pleasure. I've never met you, and I'm a huge fan. And also, just last question: you've written a lot of songs for films, and the songs that you wrote for Magnolia and Jerry Maguire, were those songs that you had, or were those sort of asked for? Did you write that specifically for those films, or?
Mostly asked for, but also, the songs I wrote for Magnolia were kind of written at the same time that Paul Thomas Anderson was writing his script. So we kind of, traded ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
So he didn't necessarily say, write a song for this part, but in reading and talking to him about what his topics were, I was like, I wrote this song based on this conversation that we just had.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of came together.
The way that, specifically Magnolia, where he sort of breaks the form of all these different narratives and everybody sings together and all that stuff, was it definitely the National. We just worked with the director Mike Mills on our last record, and he made a film. So we were writing songs that were with a director, and he produced the record too. And it really changed the way I write. It just opened up lots of new rooms to go into. It wasn't it changed me forever. It just expanded, it pushed the walls out a lot on ways to write and perspectives on writing and character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely how I'm feeling about my experience writing songs for musicals, is especially musically, that, there's definitely a feeling of oh my God, I could do anything because I don't know, there is always like a little voice in your head when you're writing for yourself where you feel like, this is not like my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Like real major chords are not my wheelhouse, or like bouncy rhythms are not my wheelhouse. So then, your brain sort of shuts it down. But when you're writing for somebody else, some imaginary person, like, I could do anything. I can, bring on the seventh chords, bring on the modulations, bring on the tempo changes, Yeah. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. I've been working a little bit with Booker T. Jones, and he's bringing in all kinds of colors that I've just never played with. It's like you're a painter all your life, and then somebody shows up with like orange and yellow, and you're like, oh God, I didn't know these existed. I didn't even have these colors. I didn't have them in my studio. I never knew how to make yellow.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Well, Aimee, I can't wait to meet in person. Maybe we'll meet at Largo once they open that back up. But let's talk about Little House on the Prairie, the musical.
I'm seriously excited about that. Please, like, if you wouldn't, I don't know if you do this, but like, please send me songs.
I will.
I am super excited, and I'll send you some super depressing songs, musical songs of mine.
I pitched it to you sort of as a joke, but I'm actually very serious. And so the fact that you don't see it as a joke, I'm like, okay, good, you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm totally in.
Let's do it. All right, I'll talk to you soon, Aimee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care, Matt. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Matt Berninger, Aimee Mann, thank you so much for joining us here on the Talkhouse Podcast. Big shouts to everyone who's checked out the Other music documentary. If you haven't had a chance yet, you can catch that at www.factory25.com/othermusic and rent it from your favorite record store or movie theater. Help support them as well.
Yep, it's a really cool thing that you can do at this time when it's so difficult for independent music stores and theaters.
Nick, I'm not going to lie, watching this film and thinking about my favorite record stores, I felt a little emo this far away from that community, which I love so much. But again, it's been nice to drop in on them on the live streams.
Definitely. Of course, having listened to this, you got to go back, listen to Matt Berninger talking with Conor Oberst.
Bright Eyes are back.
When we need them, that band, they step up.
Today's show was recorded by Matt, Aimee, Nick, and myself at our #StayHome studios. Our producer is Mark Yoshizumi, and the Talkhouse Podcast theme song was written and performed by The Range.
Hit us up on social media at Talkhouse on all the platforms.
And feel free to send me any ideas or gripes at Elia Einhorn on Twitter.
And of course, subscribe to the Talkhouse Podcast wherever you get them.
We have some incredible shows coming up. Next week is Jarvis Cocker, he of Pulp, with Magnetic Field's main man, Stephen Merritt. We have comedian Chris D'Elia with filmmaker Amanda Kramer. We have Black Belt Eagle Scout in conversation with Sasami. You don't want to miss these. You also don't want to miss the live streams that we're going to be doing. Helado Negro with Buscabulla and Julian Baker, of course, 1/3 of Boy Genius, in conversation with Katie Harkin of Slater Kinney and Courtney Barnett's band, who just released her new record as we're recording this yesterday. Congrats, Katie. Till next week, I'm Elia Einhorn.
I'm Nick Dawson.
Peace. And record stores.
Oh, sorry. I'm terrible at these. This is where it take a half an hour to do it right. This is Matt Berninger, and you're listening to the This is Matt Berninger.
Talkhouse Podcast. Talkhouse
Podcast.
Podcast.